The night it all began. The sky wept with rain, the streets glistening under broken streetlights, while Alara walked alone, her worn coat clinging to her frame. Her mind heavy with exhaustion from endless shifts at the small clinic she depended on to pay for her studies. She was used to silence, to loneliness, to surviving one day at a time. Until the sound of the clinic door slamming against the wall shattered her routine and forced her heart to freeze. A man stood there, or rather, a storm wearing the shape of one, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair plastered to his forehead by rain, one hand pressed tightly to his side as blood leaked through his shirt, dripping onto the floor in thick trails, and when his eyes met hers, she forgot how to breathe. They were steel gray, sharp enough to cut, holding the weight of someone who had seen too much death and carried too many sins. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet her feet refused to move, her pulse quickening with fear and something she dared not name. "Help me." His voice came low and steady, like command and plea in one, and Alara found herself nodding, moving, gathering her tools, though her hands shook as she guided him to the chair. He smirked faintly, as if amused by her sudden courage, but he sat, obeying her in a way that unsettled her more than disobedience would have. Up close, she saw more than just the blood. She saw the sculpted sharpness of his jaw, the curve of lips pressed in silence, the kind of beauty that belonged not to saints, but to devils. "You're losing too much blood," she murmured, stitching quickly, forcing her eyes to stay on the wound and not on the way his muscles tightened under her touch. "This is nothing," he muttered with a dark chuckle, his tone heavy with arrogance. "But when she shot back, to you, maybe. To me, it's a life." Something flickered in his gaze, a softness gone in a heartbeat, replaced with a darkness deeper than before. He leaned forward, his breath warm against her skin as he whispered words that were not gratitude but a warning. "You shouldn't have helped me." She froze, needle paused midair, daring to ask why, and his lips curved into the kind of smile that promised ruin. "Because now you'll never get rid of me." And though the storm outside howled against the windows, Alara knew the real storm had just stepped into her life, and it was wearing his face. The days that followed blurred into a haze of unease, because even though Alara convinced herself she had simply treated a stranger out of duty, the truth clawed at her every time she locked the clinic door and walked home alone. His presence lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. She saw his steel-gray eyes in the reflections of rain puddles, felt his smirk in the silence of her apartment, and worst of all, she heard his voice in her head, reminding her of his warning. "You'll never get rid of me." She told herself he was gone, that men like him came and disappeared with the night, but her fragile certainty shattered when she left work one evening and found him leaning against the black car parked at the corner, cigarette smoke curling around him like a halo of sin, his gaze fixed on her as if she had been the only person in the world he had been waiting for. Her breath caught, fear and anger warring inside her, yet when she snapped, "You shouldn't be here," his lips curved in that same dangerous smile, one that seemed carved from shadows. "I told you, Doc. I don't leave debts unpaid." His voice was smooth, unhurried, yet it carried the kind of weight that turned her legs weak. She tried to walk past, but his hand shot out, fingers brushing her wrist, light yet firm enough to stop her. The air between them thickened, charged, her heart thundering as she met his eyes, so close now that she could see the faint scar near his brow, the lines of a life carved by violence. "You think I want your thanks?" he asked softly, almost tauntingly, and when she refused to answer, his smile deepened. "No, Alara. I want something else." The sound of her name on his tongue made her stomach twist, and she realized with cold dread that he had already learned more about her than she knew about him. She pulled her hand free, anger flaring to mask the fear, but before she could step back, he leaned closer, his words brushing her ear like a vow and a threat. "You saved me. That means you're mine now." And in that moment, though the city pulsed around them with lights and noise, Alara felt as if the world had gone silent, leaving only the two of them, her, a fragile girl who wanted nothing but peace, and him, a storm wrapped in human skin who had no intention of letting her go. Elara swore she would keep her distance, that she would lock her doors, drown herself in work, and forget the man whose presence haunted her nights. But fate laughed in her face when the sound of breaking glass jolted her awake one midnight, and she stumbled into the living room to find him there again, standing like a shadow made flesh, his shirt torn, blood dripping from a fresh cut across his jaw, his chest rising and falling with the violence he had just escaped. Fury burned through her fear. As she hissed, "You can't keep doing this, barging into my life as if you own it." Yet even as she said it, her trembling hands reached for her kit, her heart betraying her resolve, because seeing him hurt pulled something raw from deep inside her that she couldn't fight. He watched her in silence, letting her press cloth against his skin, and then, with a voice low enough to sink into her bones, he murmured, "I told you, you're mine, Elara. I don't knock because I don't need permission." She tried to scoff, to shove him away, but his hand rose, catching her wrist, holding it with a gentleness that contradicted his words, his touch warm and steady as if it belonged there. Their eyes met, the air between them charged, her pulse fluttering wildly as his gaze dropped, just for a heartbeat, to her lips, and suddenly the anger she clung to twisted into something she didn't want to name. She should have pushed him back, should have screamed at him to leave, but when he leaned in, close enough that his breath mingled with hers, she froze, torn between defiance and the dangerous pulse she felt. "You hate me," he whispered, his lips brushing the barest inch from hers, "but you'll never forget me." And before she could summon the strength to prove him wrong, his mouth claimed hers in a kiss that was fire and ruin all at once, hard, possessive, leaving her gasping, her heart pounding with both terror and a desire that made her knees weak. When he finally pulled away, his smirk returned, softer this time, darker, as he whispered, "That's why you can't run." And though she wanted to deny it, Elara knew the truth in his words terrified her more than the kiss itself, because a part of her already feared she didn't want to run anymore. The kiss should have been the end, a mistake Elara could bury under anger and denial, but instead it was the beginning of a dangerous unraveling, because the very next night she found herself pulled deeper into his world without meaning to. Walking home from the clinic, she turned the corner and froze at the sight of two men dragging him toward a black van, his face bloodied yet defiant, and before she could think, she screamed, a sound that split the night and made one of the men turn, giving him the opening to fight back. Chaos erupted, shouts and gunshots tearing through the air, and Elara didn't know how she ended up pressed against the alley wall with his arm shielding her, his breath ragged in her ear as he growled, "Stay behind me, don't move." In that moment she understood, this man wasn't just danger, he lived in it, and the enemies that hunted him wouldn't hesitate to take her too. When the men fled, leaving him standing with blood on his hands and rage burning in his eyes, he turned to her slowly, jaw clenched, his shirt torn open across his chest, and the sight of her trembling made his expression shift from fury to something darker, heavier. "Do you see now?" he asked, voice rough, haunted. "This is what I am. This is the world I drag with me." She wanted to tell him to leave, to vanish from her life before he destroyed everything she had fought to protect, but instead the words caught in her throat as he stepped closer, pinning her with a gaze that stripped her down to her soul. His hand cupped her cheek, smearing blood across her skin, and she flinched at the heat of it, but couldn't pull away. She saw the monster in him, yes, but she also saw the man who had chosen to shield her instead of running. "You should hate me," he whispered, forehead pressing against hers, his voice shaking with a truth that almost broke her. "But I think that terrifies me more than any enemy that you don't." And as her heart thundered, as the alley closed in around them, Elara realized she had stepped into a storm she could never escape, because what bound her to him now wasn't fear alone, it was the cruel, undeniable pull of something deeper. Something far more dangerous than the world chasing him, desire tangled with fate. Elara told herself she would stay away, that after the alley, after the blood, after the way his hands trembled against her skin, she would never let Adrian close again. But when she stepped into the clinic the next night and found him waiting in the shadows, Leaning against the wall with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, she knew her resolve was already breaking. He looked too untouchable in his black shirt rolled to his elbows, his jaw still bruised, his stare sharp as a blade, and when she whispered, "You shouldn't be here," he only pushed off the wall and prowled toward her, each step deliberate, like a predator giving his prey time to run. She backed into the counter, breath stuttering, but he didn't touch her, not at first. His hand hovered inches from her waist, teasing, controlling, making her feel the power of his restraint before his fingers finally closed around her hip, dragging her closer until she had to tilt her head to hold his gaze. "Why are you still afraid?" he murmured, his lips brushing her ear. "You stitched me up, you screamed for me, you saw me bleed, and still you're here. Don't lie to me, Alara, you want this chaos as much as I do." She pushed at his chest, half in anger, half in panic, but he caught her wrist and slammed it gently but firmly against the counter, his other hand gripping her waist tighter, his breath hot against her mouth. "You think you can resist me?" he growled, every word dripping with warning and hunger. "You can't. I'll ruin every man who looks at you, burn every wall you hide behind, until the only place left is in my arms." Her lips parted, a protest tangled with need, and when he kissed her harder, hungrier than before, it wasn't gentle salvation, it was possession, the kind of kiss that bruised, that demanded, that stripped her defenses until the only thing left between them was the terrifying truth: she didn't want to escape him anymore. Adrian didn't give Alara time to think after that kiss. The next evening, instead of letting her slip quietly home, he was waiting outside the clinic with his car, the sleek black machine gleaming under the streetlight like a predator at rest. And before she could protest, he opened the door and ordered her inside, his voice too low, too sharp to defy. The city blurred by as he drove, his hand gripping the wheel while the other reached across to rest heavy on her thigh, pinning her in place without words, a silent reminder of his control. She wanted to push it away, to demand answers, but her body betrayed her, heat flooding where his fingers pressed through the thin fabric of her dress. When the car finally stopped, it wasn't at some elegant mansion as she might have expected, but an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, shadows spilling from its broken windows, the kind of place that reeked of secrets and danger. He guided her inside, his palm firm at the small of her back, and what she saw made her chest tighten. Men moving crates, guns glinting under dim lights, whispers cutting off the moment they noticed Adrian. He stood taller, colder, commanding their silence with nothing but a glance, and Alara felt the air shift around him. Here, he wasn't just the wounded man she had stitched, or the arrogant stranger who stole kisses in the dark. Here, he was something terrifying. Untouchable, a king in a world built on blood. "This is me," he said quietly, dragging her closer until her back pressed against his chest, his hand sliding up to curl around her jaw, forcing her to look at the shadows that obeyed him. "This is what you've walked into." She should have screamed, should have run, but when he bent to whisper against her ear, lips grazing her skin as his grip tightened, she shivered instead. "You're mine now, Alara. You can hate me, you can fight me, but you'll never escape me." And in the hollow silence of that warehouse, with his darkness wrapped around her like chains, Alara realized with a mix of fear and craving that maybe she didn't want to. The storm between them reached its breaking point one night when Alara stood in Adrian's world, surrounded by shadows and choices she never thought she'd face, her heart tearing between fear and the dangerous pull of the man who refused to let her go. She had tried to leave, had packed her things and told herself she would vanish before his grip consumed her completely, but when she opened the door, he was already there, waiting, eyes burning like fire through the dark. "Run if you want," he said, his voice a blade wrapped in silk, "but understand this, Alara, I'll always find you." She shook, tears stinging her eyes, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Why me? You could have anyone ruin anyone, yet you chose me. Why?" And for the first time, the mask slipped, his chest rose and fell as though the words cost him something, and when he finally spoke, it wasn't a threat but a confession. "Because you see me," he rasped, stepping closer, pinning her against the door with his body, his hand cradling her jaw, rough yet trembling. Not the monster. Not the blood. Just me. And I'd burn the whole world before I let that go. The kiss that followed wasn't just hunger or possession, it was surrender, raw and desperate, the merging of two souls tangled in fire. Ilara's fingers fisted his shirt, pulling him closer instead of pushing away, her fear drowned in the truth that had been haunting her since the night he staggered into her clinic. She wanted him, even if he destroyed her. And when he whispered against her lips, "You're mine, Angel, and I'm yours, whether I like it or not," she knew it wasn't salvation she had found in him, but something far more dangerous and far more beautiful. It was love, born in the shadows, carved from chaos, and it was theirs.